All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Let Your Words Count, episode 28. I am Gary Gant here with Ethan Merriweather, and here we explore the meaning of the words, the meanings behind the words that shape our lives. Today's word is resilience. Resilience. All right, and I'll just our typical format. I'll give some of the definition. Ethan will give the history and the derivation of the word. So for the definition of resilience, we have resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It involves toughness and the ability to bounce back from adversity. Resilience helps individuals cope with stress, setbacks, and unexpected challenges. So the definition again, resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It involves toughness and the ability to bounce back from adversity. All right, Ethan, do you have what you have on the history and the origin today?
Oh, yeah. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So we have the etymology here.
Yes, sir.
The word resilience comes from the Latin word resilire, which means to spring back or to rebound. Originally used to describe physical objects, it evolved to include emotional and psychological strength in the face of adversity. Okay? We have some historical context here. The concept of resilience has long been explored in philosophy and psychology. You know, it's interesting that that's the typical process that we've been looking at more and more lately is the philosophy and the psychology behind these words, because it really creates an impact in our individual lives, right? However, in the 20th century, psychologists like Viktor Frankl emphasized resilience in their work on finding meaning and strength through suffering. Today, resilience is a key component in mental health and personal development. I might have said the psychologist's name wrong, so Forgive me. All right. G, what do you got on that?
So I had something else in my template too, along those same lines. As far as the original meaning, the word it was derived from, and it also talks about it referring to the physical ability of an object to return to its original shape after being compressed or deformed. So you think of like how a memory foam mattress, right? You lay on it or you squeeze it and you let your hand go and your handprint's there for a little bit, but then it kind of fluffs back out and it takes its original form again. So that's another kind of like just, kind of visually what came up to me as I was looking at this. But that's, again, another kind of good reminder or visual aid to what resilience means. You compress like a mattress or some foam, and as soon as you move that pressure, it comes back to its original shape. So a lot of times when we're going into the words here too, we look at what's the positive and or negative aspect of the word. How is it generally viewed? And is there a way we can take it and, kind of reframe it in any way if it needs be, or if it needs to be reframed, or, kind of help further the definition of it some. So resilience is generally viewed positively, right? It talks about strength, persistence, and the ability to overcome adversity. And that's the important part when we talk about like the psychology aspect and the philosophy aspect is overcoming adversity. You're not going to be a human that has any significant time on this planet and not face some kind of adversity or challenge. So knowing that that's it's going to happen to everybody, and everybody that's here today that's again survived and has gone through some kind of challenge or some kind of adversity. You're looking at examples of humans who can thrive or who endure past those situations. But resilience speaks more than just enduring these situations. It's more so building up a resistance and a strength or a toughness by having had to go through some of those situations, right? You're better prepared for future adversity, future challenges, because you've already gone through some. We even kind of talked about something related to that in the empathy episode. What was the one we did
Empathy
with Mike?
And
Authenticity, right? And how just the ability to kind of go through some situations and get stronger as a result of it. That's what that resilience is. You've gone through a challenge or some kind of trying times, and The result of you having gone through those is that you're more resilient to those same kind of pressures or challenges the next time they come up, right? So you got any other thoughts on that, E?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm loving the simple term of bouncing back.
Right.
Just bouncing back from that stress. And you going down that path of thought makes me more interested in, did the product or did that thing know that it was going to go through such traumatic stress? Most of the times it didn't.
Right.
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 Like for instance, like I looked up a tree. We have a good friend that graduated from Michigan State, and Michigan State is one of their main sciences there, or is biology and agriculture.
Gotcha.
Right. And he talked to me about this word called digmomorphogenesis.
Okay.
I can't. Digmomorphogenesis.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, what it is, it's an event that takes place on trees when wind or severe storms come. It causes the trunk of that tree or trees to get stronger. The base of the base of the tree to get stronger, so it can withstand it, so it can grow. And I think that the resilience of this is very, very, very important. So I'm going to read this real quick, right? So resilience is a key part of digmomorphogenesis. In fact, the entire process of digmomorphogenesis is about enhancing a plant's resilience to mechanical stresses, like wind, touch, or even in movement. Through this process, trees and plants become better equipped to survive and thrive in challenging environments. The increased structural strength, such as a thicker trunk and stronger roots, flexibility in branches and stems, and adaptation in growth patterns are all ways in which the tree becomes more resilient forces like wind. And it actually breaks it down a little bit further. I thought that was very, very important. And I really believe that that's a good dotted line to, and not even a dotted line, maybe a direct correlation to what you were talking about.
Absolutely.
As far as the pressures and the strengths.
Absolutely.
Or the pressures and the stresses.
Right. Yep. And that's a good example, like in biology with the trees that you brought up, right? Great example. It's again, one we can all relate to, one we've all seen. There is another kind of engineering term, or material science more specifically, talking about the same kind of phenomena, but this is less about a biological thing as much as like kind of materials and like metals and stuff like that. But in material science, there's also this process called strain hardening, which is very much the same thing, right? It's you take and deform a metal or plastic or something like that beyond what they call its yield point, and that results in higher strength and resistance to further deformation, right? So you take, and we've seen this process. We're both kung fu flick junkies, right? So we've seen enough martial arts movies where some master goes to make a katana blade to go kill the villain of the movie or whatever. And you see when they start, they take the metal and they fold it and heat it and cool it, and fold it again, heat it and cool it. And that process, the process they call tempering, right? So not, very similar to what we talked about biologically for a tree, but you take metal and you keep folding it and folding it and folding it. And that process makes the metal stronger. It makes it where the blade can have a sharper edge and be resilient to cut through materials without breaking, right? So that's generally, and again, before we kind of dive too much into the philosophy and the human aspect of it, we're kind of, giving these examples from the material world because it applies. We've seen it a lot, and we sometimes might have a harder time finding examples in how people have behaved in some of these things.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And seeing strength in ourselves. But when you look at it in terms of these material things out in the world, it's easy to relate to. Now, another definition that was kind of related to this strain hardening is a material that you're doing strain hardening to has to be what they call ductile, right? And ductile also does refer to like something that can be kind of stretched and pulled into a string. But the part of the definition that I liked was the ability to be deformed without losing toughness. And that's, again, very important when you're talking about folding a metal to make a sword or something like that. But the ability to be deformed and not lose your toughness, right? So again, we want to make sure we're not talking about this in a way that's triggering or challenging to people, talking about, being tough through adversities, like where people sometimes have adversity and the anxiety that builds up. People have a hard time finding strength sometimes. That's why we're choosing a word like this today, right? Because we want to get into ways we can find to kind of build resilience up or recognize resilience, because it's hard to see sometimes. You're in the middle of some hard or trying situation and you might feel overcome, beat down, defeated, whatever. And it's hard to realize that if this is not your first time going through that kind of situation, you might not be able to see, or you might neglect to see your resilience in that situation. If it's something you've overcome before, your response might be, why is this always happening to me? Why am I always going through this? But at the same time, if it's I'm always going through this, that means you've overcome it because you're still here to tell the story, right? So even if we have a hard time finding and recognizing and calling out toughness for what it is within ourselves, you have to be able to recognize if you are alive and you've gone through some things, you overcome those things, and those things have made you stronger, right?
Man, that's awesome. So say that definition again about the ability to be deformed.
Ductile, right? So the ability to be deformed without losing toughness.
Without losing.
And it's similar to what was in the strain hardening definition, right? It occurs when a material is deformed plastically beyond its yield point, resulting in increased strength and resistance to further deformation.
That's there's so many things that you can take from that.
Mm-hmm.
So you know me when I always talk about chaos.
Right.
I always talk about the chaotic side of things.
Right.
And whenever you hear a word like deformed, it's always come up as a negative thing.
Right.
So once again, I'm in the automotive industry,
mm-hmm.
and the word deformed shows up in some of the characteristics of failures.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you hear a word like deformed, one of the words I hate is wonky. Whenever somebody say wonky,
right,
man, this part was wonky.
I will be sure to start using that more often.
I cannot stand that word
right.
wonky. But anyway, but when you hear deformities is deformed, or it's a defect or whatnot,
right?
If a person, when I'm reading this, the ability to be deformed and still keep toughness with what do you say? What is it again? I gotta write that down. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. It's the ability to be deformed without losing toughness.
Without losing. All right. Without losing toughness. I had to write that down. That was awesome, man. To be deformed without losing toughness, because the key right there is it doesn't matter if it's deformed. Is because a lot of times we look at the beauty of things, right?
Right.
But sometimes the deformity is actually showing a story of something.
Yes, it does.
Like when something is deformed, that means you have to ask the question, what did that thing go to?
Mm-hmm.
What did that thing go through?
Right.
In order there's obviously there's a story here. What did it go through in order to have that condition?
Things we call witness marks, right?
Witness
mm-hmm.
marks, because you have to go back down and address the events or the experiences of that deformity, right. When you see a soldier come back from the war or whatnot, he'll have a bullet in his. I had a grandfather. My grandfather. I said I had a grandfather. Actually, he was actually our step grandfather.
Okay.
But he walked around with a limp because he still had a bullet in his leg. He still was injured. World War I, man.
Wow.
Yeah, at least that's what they said, right? But he always walked around with a limp, right?
Gotcha.
And he, every time you would talk to him, he would have a story about how the enemy would drop, because he was a medic in World War One, and they were talking about the bombs that were dropped in his area, and it hit the artillery zone.
Right.
And it just wiped out like the whole area that he was at. Man,
Jeez.
I can't remember how he got hurt, but I'm saying all that just to say how soldiers come back, and there's this, going back to the word bounce back. They have to spring back from that emotional stress. A lot of guys, bless their heart, a lot of them don't recover. So, and that's the reason why I'm saying, like, with this deformity, the deformity tells a story, right? Even with the deformities, we would look at it, oh, you're not beautiful, you scrap it out. But you don't realize you have to take the time and learn from that. There's a toughness that, and maybe I'm bending the rules for this conversation.
I like the direction you're heading with it, yeah.
But I'm thinking about that. Things are not disposable. That's what I'm saying. It's like, and I know I'm probably, I want to address this a little bit more, but when you look at a soldier that comes back from fighting, if he doesn't realize that there's a resilient process that he has to have, he will be scrapped away, so to speak.
Interesting, man.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
I'm not saying that in a negative way. What I'm saying that in such a way, from the standpoint as that they are important. You know what I'm saying? And they have to utilize this process of resilience to bounce back. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So we're taking it from the material side to the actual, spiritual, human side of things. I love it. You know what I mean? I
love it.
So what are your thoughts? Man?
So, I mean, as you're talking about that, I know, again, this is, we talked about the same kind of branch topic I'm going to go on to here last episode, but I'm again, as you're talking about, a soldier that goes through some things and the country finds him useful to send to war and support their war effort and whatever their hostilities are towards another nation. But then when that person comes back and they have their scars, they have their witness marks, they have the effects that they wear on them from what they went through. And then when they come back and try to integrate into normal society sometimes doesn't accept those changes. And again, it puts me back into the mindset of, again, we have our music projects we do here as well with DMF Entertainment. And on DMF, on YouTube, if you look up Spare a Rhyme, and that's the exact concept we were talking about, right? This man goes to war, puts his life on the line for the country, and when he comes back, doesn't find equivalent respect for what he went through and what he sacrificed or what he lost, right? And that's one of the kind of driving concepts behind that song. So again, check out DMF Spare a Rhyme. But that's that concept. Somebody goes through something, they've gone through some kind of pain, some kind of trial, and when they show the effects of what they've gone through, people sometimes that's uncomfortable for them to see that, oh, this person lost a leg in a war or something like that, and people might turn away and not want to look at it, but force yourself to look at it. Look at what that person has gone through, what they've sacrificed, what they put on the line in the name of serving something bigger than themselves. And there's even a person that really I despise, that when they look at vets and they do this publicly and they'll kind of say, like, I don't want to see the ones that have been injured or who have been hurt or disfigured. It's like, how dare you? The person has put their life on the line to serve their country, or worse, people have paid the ultimate price. You don't have those people come back and look at them like they're second rate or like they're less than because they've come back, like you said, deformed in some way, without a limb or something else like that, or with some limp that they can't shake. Look at those people, you know what I mean? Force yourself to look at them and see them, and not with pity, but as human. Recognize that they've gone through some tough and some challenging things in service to something bigger than themselves. If somebody like that doesn't deserve respect and validation, then nobody does. You know what I mean? So I think that it's a very important thing as we start talking about bridging this gap, as you were talking about, as we go from like the material and biological world into kind of how does this word apply to humanity. And I love when you brought up that word deform, right? We'll talk about a part has its original design dimensions. And when a part comes back from the field, you have it as a warranty return or something else, and it's been brought back because it's broken or because it's been quote unquote deformed. That means that it's changed from its original dimensions in some way. The part looks different than it did when it was shipped out of the assembly plant on the vehicle, right? It somehow is not any longer lining up to the specs or the design intent or the way you intended for it to look. But I love as we kind of take this and transition this from material into human, because that deformation that people go through is what builds character and gives every person their identity. You know what I mean? If we come in with this mindset of expecting us to not have gone through any kind of adversity, not have gone through anything, and we see people like that, and we have that saying, right? If you kind of look at a man that hasn't gone through anything, it's going to make him weaker because he hasn't had anything to test or try him to help him find strength, right? So we can look at it like I expect everybody to be perfect and look like they've never gone through anything, but that doesn't build up any kind of real character or strength. People go through things. And sometimes they're going to wear the effects of what they've gone through externally. So look at that, but we have to learn to find beauty in that, not to look at somebody as being deformed, broken, and I don't like looking at what this person has gone through, but look at that and see the strength because the person has endured. They're still there. They've gone through whatever that situation is, and we have to. There's a deeper psychological point I'm kind of building up to, but I've been talking too long.
No, you good, man. Keep going.
You chime in.
Well, I was just going to say, I love what you said. I think that the question that I have, and I always have questions concerning the negative side.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
Is there something we're missing? The thought that I have in my mind is, we think we know what resilience look like, but a person that lacks it, right?
Interesting.
Do they know that, or how can I ask that question? How do they know that resilience is what they need for that character, to build up that character? Kind of like what you were saying earlier about a man that's never experienced anything, right? But we know that experience is a part of the process, right? I'm not telling anybody go out there to just get witness marks just to tell a story. It has nothing to do with that, because live long enough and you're going to face a trial or two.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Living long enough, resilience is going to be a process, but we need, the reason why we're talking about this word, because this word is actually a spinoff of the word authenticity.
Right.
So the last word, if you haven't seen our episode, was talking about authenticity. It's talking about two things that really came up within the episode was that really struck me that I never thought of before is the ego, the way you view yourself internally, and your persona, how others view you, right? So one of the interesting aspects is how crushing to an individual when a test comes that somehow you determined that you wasn't valuable enough, or what you was doing was not valuable enough, that removed or stripped you from your authenticity, right? In some type of way. And maybe I'm saying that a little different. But the reason why, in my mind, that it went from authenticity to resilience is once that storm comes, right? That is going to be the proving grounds of how we should bounce back. And the story that Mike Wilson, he was on the call, and he brought up a beautiful story.
Yeah, think about that.
A beautiful story. And I'm not going to spoil it. You're going to have to go check it out yourself. You watch that episode, right? But the whole point is he was trying to depict a picture of how the the examples of the ego and the persona can cause us to respond in events in different ways.
Right.
And that's why resilience is a very, very important action that we should have. It's positive. Does it have like negatives to it? I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. Go ahead, G.
Yeah, and I love the way you tied that together, right? Because that story, and I've been thinking about that story a lot lately too. Very good analogy and kind of parable that we talked about there with authenticity. But the way you kind of you brought out that the challenges a person goes through, and how we can choose to kind of define ourselves as a result of the things we've overcome. Right? You can define yourself as, oh, I'm the person that's always going through this, or you could define yourself as a person that every time you've gone through it, you've come out and you survived it. So I like that, and this is kind of where I was going, like with the psychological kind of aspect of deformation again, because you might say a part doesn't match its spec anymore, it's been deformed and its design doesn't look the same. But with a human, that's a very dynamic thing, right? You can look at and say, okay, well, my experiences have deformed me. They've shaped me. They've changed me. We all carry scars in our body of things we've gone through. But it's up to the human to say, what kind of person do I want to be? You can look at a hardship you've gone through and said, okay, this hardship broke me, made my life difficult, whatever the case is. And you can look at that and say, well, now I'm deformed. Now I've been affected by this hardship so bad that I don't look the way I used to anymore. I don't, whatever the outcome is. And that might be true. But as a human, it's up to you to decide, what is your design intent? What do you want that final design to look like? And you can choose. You can choose to say, I choose to see myself as the person that maybe carries around these scars, these witness marks, as a testament to my strength and not to my weakness or my victimhood. And that's not to say that people don't go through situations where they truly are victims, but I'm just saying it's like, to call a human deformed for what they've gone through, you don't know what their design intent is. You don't know what that person's end result and end stage is supposed to be, and how the things that they've gone through have been a key component in developing the person into who they are supposed to be. Wow. So to call a human deformed because of some event that's changed them is really very short-sighted. You know what I mean? Because again, that person, if I'm supposed to be made stronger by all these trials and these hardships and wars and everything else, I am going to come out scarred, but I'm also getting closer and closer to my design. You might think it's deformed because you don't understand what that person is supposed to go through and look like, but it might be a different story to that person, right?
Very good, man. So you made me think about something as well. I'm glad you brought that up, man. See, the deformities, and that's something that we should truly look at a little bit more, or maybe the anomalies in some type of way, because I think that it's very important for us as humans. What we do is we constantly look at our own circles, right? This little bubble that we live in right now, but we don't stretch our thoughts, which we should exercise a little bit more, stretching our thoughts a little bit further and walk, and not necessarily walk, but identify. Going back to empathy. Empathy, you think you walk in somebody else's shoes for a moment.
Right.
So I saw this, I love watching documentaries, and I saw this documentary of a woman that was born without arms. And in this documentary, the woman ended up, she had a baby. And watching this mother without arms was able to change the baby, feed the baby, make food, and I believe she was actually driving. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Wow! On YouTube. Wow. No, I have seen that because they can drive with their feet, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, it's skills. What is to me? I think about when one thing is missing,
right?
Something else is strengthened.
Yes, bro.
You see what I'm saying?
Definitely.
And I think that is so important. So we have our faculties, right, of our limbs and different things like that.
Right.
And I'm very grateful for that, right?
Sure.
But there's someone else that's always doing worse than you in some type of way. However, they are actually excelling with the limitations that they have more than the people that have activities of their limbs in some type of way.
Absolutely.
Right. So if you talk about a person that have resilience, that is a person that probably didn't even allow failure And that's kind of what I was talking about. A person that's dealing with resilience issues or whatnot, are they looking at other people to learn from and say, if this person is able to do that,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Wow.
They have not even allowed a person that this person have no arms. There's some people don't have eyes. Some people are born without eyes. That's an actual thing, a birth defect. You already know some blind, some they're deaf. They have different things that's going on with their bodies. What you said here a second ago was about being short-sighted. Is powerful, man, because we're not empathizing and not identifying the value that people can still hold,
Right.
even if they're not quote unquote normal.
Right.
That doesn't mean nothing.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? That's like,
right.
what are we doing as humans? You can't see. And that's one thing I want to be more aware of my thoughts.
Yes.
Of looking at someone that have certain physical
Challenges, right?
there you go, challenges. I don't want to be rude or anything like that. And I have a certain prejudice when it comes to that in my own mind, my own orchestrated prejudice, because this person is lacking some some abilities or whatnot.
Right.
I don't ever want to do that.
I understand.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't ever want to do that. For
sure.
You know?
For sure.
How do I know is when that person crossed my path, I can learn I'm learning that I am the one with limitations.
I love it.
I'm actually the one with limitations because I'm prejudging what that person can do.
That's right.
And actually, that person is actually doing far more than what I'm able to do with the little bit that she has.
For sure.
You see what I'm saying? So anyway, so when you talk about resilience and when you're talking about bouncing back, when you're talking about the deforming of metals and folding it back and forth until they're making it strong, and then you tempering it, you bring it. Another thing is not only do they bend it, but they put it in the heat, in the fire multiple times. You know?
Rapidly heat it, rapidly cool it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, and when I was a child, I used to wash the dishes, these glass mason jars in our everybody had mason jars,
I had
right?
them too, bro. Yep.
And would the water, the cups would sit in the water, right? Hot water.
Right.
When I take it out, try to get some water, to drink some water, put some ice in there, and I put some cold water in it. Guess what happens?
Shattered.
Pop! Pop! Thermal shock. Thermal shock. So I think that there is a time, even in tempering, there's a process that takes place where a conditioning of that metal, a conditioning of all of us can happen, or else we would shatter.
I love it.
You see what I'm saying? So with the resilience,
Yes,
is the ability and the strengthening of an individual. However, there's still a time element.
I love it.
That comes with resistance, or not with resilience. You know. So that's what another thought that I had. I feel like I was talking.
No,
too much
you
in
good,
that
bro.
one.
It was good though. But I mean that time element that you brought in, and also this goes back to just design intent, right? And I see Mrs. Marier talking, like saying differences maybe, right? But appreciating somebody else's differences without looking down on them.
Yes.
But that comes back, to you again. Why? You had to think through how long did it take the Japanese to develop the process of heating the metal, rapidly cooling it, folding it, hammering it, whenever, heat it, rapidly cool it, fold it, hammer it, heat it. Going through that process, right? That, yes, the metal is going through all these things like, okay, what are they doing? But that person that's making the sword understands that when this sword is done, it's going to be hitting up against other swords. It's going to hit metal. It has to be resilient. A sword that hits another sword and shatters, that soldier's are going to die. And you're not going to have a very long career as a blacksmith, right? So if you're going to be building up something that's going to be used in that type of warfare, you have to purposely put that metal through things that make it more resilient. You're building up resilience and resistance as that thing goes on. But you brought up another, and I'm loving how you're kind of setting up all these segues perfectly, because, and as we talk about balance with all the words we discuss here, right? On the balance side of resilience, there is a potential downside or negative aspect to resilience if we don't balance it the right way, right? So it can be negative if it leads to resilience, can be negative if it leads to some kind of emotional suppression. And what do I mean by that? If you take the mindset of I have to stand, resist, endure, persist through everything that I go through, and you should try to as much as you can. But if you get so much in the mindset that I have to just endure this hardship and you just keep pushing through and keep pushing through, there is the potential harm of emotional suppression. There is the potential harm of overexertion and exhaustion. There's that potential of, if you don't recognize when you need to stop and take breaks, or have a rest or some kind of self-care period in the middle of that, having a mind to just resist and be resilient to everything that you face may come back around and have a negative effect.
Yes.
Because you haven't recognized when, okay, I've been enduring this. And sometimes, right, and I just, as soon as I'm saying this, sometimes you don't have any control over whether a situation is persisting and pushing on you so much that you might think in your mind, I need to rest, but the situation you're not in control of, it's not going to let you rest, right? But if you're kind of going through a situation you have some degree of control over, if you can't get out of that situation, at least recognize people you can go talk to and, again, share, and hopefully in sharing what you're going through, either find someone else has some strength or encouragement for you, or maybe can even help you with the situation to relieve some of the pressure. But that's some of the ways resilience can lead to negativity, is if it's suppressing emotions, if it leads to you staying in an unhealthy or a harmful situation and not seeking change or seeking help. So you have to know your limits, endure as much as you can, but also recognize when you need to take time to kind of reflect, to rest, to get help, to share, and kind of unburden yourself with that to a degree, right?
No, I thought that was pretty cool. I think that the word that you just said, the last word, was rest.
Yes.
I think that the rest is during the process of an ironsmith, a blacksmith, you name it. Anyone that deals with irons, anyone deal with glass, anyone that deals with things that possibly or potentially can shatter.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
If it's under processed or over processed, there's a balance that's there that you're talking about.
Right.
So the resting time, or I would call it a buffer, is the time where the molecules or the materials can settle, and then they can what do you call it? It's a term, I can't even think of it right now, but it basically it cools down and is able to form back to the state that it's normally at. Right. I can't think of it right now.
Right.
But I think that that's how we are as well.
For sure.
Right. This is the reason why we should rest. You have people that exercising, right? You know, when you work out your muscles or whatnot, there is a resilience that happens within with your muscles, right?
Absolutely.
But there is a process of rest that your body needs to take, or else them bones are going to break.
Right.
Them bones are going to break.
That's
man.
right.
The muscles are going to tear.
For sure.
I was just watching a quick episode, or just it was a short with Papa Pump. One of the Snyders,
right.
The Snyder brothers,
Detroit wrestlers.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the Steiner brothers, if you watched him, you saw his cage right here started to spread over and over, and it looked interesting, right? And they was asking him what happened, and he was just saying that all the lifting that he was doing, because he was
Yes, he was. Steroids, but yes.
Yeah, and that could be part of it too, right? You know what I'm saying? And so the deterioration, and was what we're talking about with resilience or whatnot. Can there be a deterioration? And that's why I always want to look at the chaotic side of things, right? Because within the chaos
Love
size, is it something missing that we're doing? Where you're thinking, I love what you said about the resilience. Am I resting? Is something that I'm doing? Is it something that's out of my control that's keeping me
Right.
to be in this mindset, right?
Right.
And so it's very, very important for us to think about that. Going back to that tree, a tree cannot command the wind to stop.
That's right.
You see what I'm saying?
That's right.
All it can do is stay there and resist.
I love it.
And become resilient.
That's right.
And that's another word that we need to talk about is resistance.
Right.
Right. Because the resistance also falls in the part of resilience. You know what I mean? But anyway,
Absolutely.
my last thought right now is like this. These words that we're bringing up are so important for us if we can just take the time and allow these words to impact our thoughts, our mind, and do something with them. When we have words like empathy, today's word is resilience. Really think about the word, really define it, and really apply it in your heart, and think about historically when this word was actually applied in your life. And if you can remember when it was executed in your life in some type of way, do it again. Do it again and master it. Even go further with it. Do it better, because we all need to be resilient in many, many ways. So, man, just think it out. I have no other words to say. G, you got any last words?
You good? Yeah. I mean, it's anytime we talk about something like this that deals with humans enduring and overcoming trauma, right? I feel like it's always important to kind of mention the importance of having someone to confide in, whether it's a family member, whether it's a mental health professional. Don't let situations continue to get worse and push you to a breaking point without sounding out and seeking help, right? And this word we've been talking about today, right? Yes, its resilience is, can be reframed as the ability to bend without breaking. But sometimes situations may break you. You're human. It's fine, right? We do our best to endure, but sometimes situations may overcome us and overtake us and pushes us to the point of breaking. It's okay that it happens sometimes, as long as, it's important to have the mindset that, people go through trauma, but for you to have the mindset to grow past trauma. Once the trauma is gone, you have to focus on two things. It's first is recovering, trying to get yourself back to normal as close as you can, to heal, to have time to recover, to rest, to be restored. So there's the recovery aspect, but then there's the trying to grow stronger from that challenge, right? Trying to take the time, like you said, process and think through what you've gone through in order to build up resilience. Recognize the strength you had to have to overcome whatever that hardship was, and the fact that you're still standing and still here, and the testimony that speaks to as far as in your own capability to withstand some of these things and to endure them. So I feel like that's just an important point to mention. Yes, resilience talks about you having strength and the ability to kind of endure these things, bend but not break. But, again, talk to people, recognize sometimes, life is difficult. Life is hard. You know what I mean? We all know that, but it's important to kind of be in this mindset to build emotional strength and try as much as you can through these hardships to have a positive outlook. And one of the most important things, and this, again, going back to your comment about processing it and how do we find ways to kind of grow from it, developing coping mechanisms.
Yes.
And with your coping mechanisms, again, approach it scientifically like an experiment if you need to, but write down some of the different ways you can either learn that you have either learned how to get through some of those things, or ways or things you've done, activities that have helped you recover, right? Identify what coping mechanisms work for you, refine those, reuse those, but, just seek for help as many different ways as you can, right? We try to do what we can to kind of help and give, some mindset help and kind of, analysis here or whatever, and even sometimes sharing things we've gone through. But as humans, man, we all go through a lot. We have to endure hardship, right? But it's just important that we learn to recover and to cope, and again, bend without breaking. So that's it for me. Just admonishment. Mental health is important. Listen to and look for signs if somebody that you know and love is struggling. And if you yourself are struggling, don't hesitate. Don't think it's weak to reach out for help, right? It's not. And there's no pride or anything else like that. No respect lost because somebody says they need help. Get help before you allow harm to come to yourself or to somebody else that you see that's going through something like that. All right. Last words, E?
No, I'm good. You good, brother.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and appreciate you all coming here for another episode. Join us next week, same time, Monday, 7 o'clock. Don't forget to go to forgedforinfinity.com to get the merch we have. Let Your Words Count shirts. We got Infinite Insight, DMF, all kind of stuff there. So go take a look at the shop as well. And thank you also, Susan and Mrs. Mary, for joining us and for your comments. That rest is valuable, rest and balance, absolutely key words here as we talk today. So thank you all for joining us. We love you. God bless.